Niranjan Tiwari. I am going to teach you class 10th first flight, first chapter, A Letter to God. In previous classes, we are already discussed about this extract and we find how a poor farmer faces the calamity of nature. Hailstones destroys all his crops and all his crops, flowers, and all hill areas full of white salt. Today, we discuss the next part of this chapter. But in the hearts of all who lived in that solitary house in the middle of the valley, there was a single hope, help from God. Do not be so upset, even though this seems like a total loss. Remember, no one dies of hunger. That's what they say. No one dies of hunger. All through the night, Lencho thought only of his one hope, the help of God, whose eyes, as he had been instructed, see everything, even what is deep in one's consciousness. Lencho was an ox of a man, working like an animal in the fields, but still he knew how to write. The following Sunday, at daybreak, he began to write a letter which he himself would carry to town and place in the mail. It was nothing less than a letter to God. In these lines, writer describes about the real condition of a poor farmer Lencho. His all crops are destroyed. Nothing hope is remain for their survival. So only one hope is to help of God. It shows the conflict between man and nature, how man proposes his desires, and it is totally in hands of nature to fulfill his desires or not. But at last, the belief to the nature is shown in these lines. God, he wrote, if you do not help me, my family and I will go hungry this year. These lines shows the relation between a man to the God. Here, man wanted to make a relation to the God, and by this relation, he said to the God, if you do not help me, my family and I will go hungry this year. I need 100 pesos in order to sow my field again and to live until the crop comes, because the health is strong. He wrote to God on the envelope, put the letter inside, and this trouble went to town. At the post office, he placed a stamp on the letter and dropped it into the mailbox. And Lencho expresses his desire to God. You fulfill my desire. You are my everything. If you do not help me, how I or my family survive? So he decided to write a letter to the God. For this purpose, he went to the town and wrote a letter to the God. One of the employees who was a postman and also helped at the post office, went to his boss laughing heartily and showed him the letter to God. Never in his career as a postman had he known that address. These lines shows the belief to the God. How a man believe on the God. I think Lencho was a man who believed on God blindly. But the postman shows the real condition of the people. People believe to the God, but these types of belief, this blind faith of this faith is shown a Lencho's hard belief on the God. Him letter to the God. Never in his career as a postman had he knew that address, and he expresses his expression. He never know about this address. The postmaster, a fat, amiable, and very friendly and pleasant man who followed, also broke out laughing when he heard about the letter. He also broke out laughing, but almost immediately he turned seriously and tapping the letter on his desk, commented, "What faith! I wish I had the faith to the man who wrote this letter, startling up a correspondence with God." And the postmaster was amiable man, and he thinks about the Lencho's faith on the God, and he compared himself. What faith! And I wish I had the faith to the man who wrote this letter. So, in order not to shake the writer's faith in God, the postmaster came up with an idea. Answer the letter, but when he opened it, it was evident that to the answer it, he needed something more than goodwill, ink and paper. But he struck to his resolution. He asked for money from his employees. He himself gave part of his salary, and several friends of his were obliged to give something for an act of charity. It was impossible for him to gather together the 100 pesos, so he was able to send the farmer only a little more than half. He put the money in an envelope addressed to Lencho, and with it a letter containing only a single word as a signature God. The action of postmaster is a very good in nature, and he thinks about the Lencho, and he felt Lencho's position was very worse in that time. So he wanted to help Lencho for charity. He convinced his employees to donate some money for Lencho's help, and he gathered money, but it is very difficult to him how he gathered 100 pesos. Only 70 pesos he maintained, and he write a letter. Only single word he wrote on the letter as a signature God. The following Sunday, Lencho came a bit earlier than usual to ask if there was a letter for him. It was the postman himself who handed the letter to him, while the postmaster, experiencing the contentment of a man who had performed a good deed, looked on from his office. Lencho showed not the slightest surprise on seeing the money. Such was his confidence. But he became angry when he counted the money. God could not have made a mistake, nor could he have denied Lencho